This is the story. Interestingly, on Friday 20th June 2025, Uganda's Court of Appeal dismissed the appeal by Wamala Godfrey aka Troy for the killing of Mwozey Radio on 22nd January 2018. Wamala sought to overturn his conviction and sentence for manslaughter imposed by the High Court, calling it harsh and excessive, especially after the High Court had convicted him of a lesser offense of manslaughter and not murder, I believe. Now, more than ever, this is the right moment to tell the story. Also, allow me call him Mwozey Radio or just Radio. In this story, you might notice varying dates for when Uganda lost its pearl. I will bring clarity to that. This story provides a factual timeline of Radio's rise and of his death in 2018 based on official court documents and credible reports.
It also introduces two new voices that should be heard one more time. One is Boomlocks Miles HS1, formerly known as John Miles Coco Banton, an elder brother to dancehall maestro Peter Miles, who shares an account of Radio's last moments. The second is producer Washington, the bandit David Otim, who shares his truth on what happened that evening at a small bar in Uganda's former capital, Entebbe. I also examined the long-standing elephant in the room in Uganda's music sector, weak intellectual property protection and reward for work. Radio's tragedy exposes how our laws continue to lag behind those of Nigeria, South Africa, and others, despite regional ties and increasing demands on artists in today's digital age. Let me take you back to the roots. Little is known about Mwozey Radio's early life. Regrettably, not even Sylvia Nikinjit, the paternal aunt who raised Radio for close to a decade, can unravel the mystery of Mwozey's roots. All I can share is that Mwozey's father is Ladislas Ernest Nakentej. Sylvia told the Daily Monitor on Thursday, February 1, 2018. It is said from credible reports that on January 25 of 1985, in the eastern region of Busoga in Uganda, a mother named Jane Kasubo, who sold food in local markets, and a father named Ladislas Ernest Nekinjit welcomed a son into their world. They named him Moses Nekentide Sekibogo. It is vital to mention that a Daily Monitor article by Ian Ortega, published on Friday, February 2, 2018, says Radio was born on January 25, 1983. It is equally vital to mention that one gentleman, named George Entebbe Asimwe aka Kokodio, a name he picked up due to his rich history in Ugandan football, also said in an interview with Buket TV on February 1, 2024, that he, Kokodio, was the father of Mwozey Radio. At the time of the interview, Mzee Entebbe Asimwe Kokodio had just resumed work after 6 years of mourning Mwozey Radio's death. George Entebbe Asimwe, the taxi driver, says he met Mwozey Radio's mother after retiring from football. He claims he met Radio's mom while he was working at a hotel, began a relationship, and she later gave birth to Mwozey Radio before the couple eventually went their separate ways. Entebbe added that he has over 15 children from different wives and they have each grown with their mothers and relatives since he couldn't take care of all of them. He also said when he tried to get access to the late Mwozey Radio before and after his death, he was backed by his ex, Jane Kasubo. But according to James Mutiagul, the director of 92.5 Victoria FM Radio in Jinja, who was a close friend of Radio, he confirms that Mwozey Radio's mother is a one Jane Kasubo, a Musoga from Naminya village, Wakisi sub-county in Bikwi district. James Mutiagul added, he, Radio, always mentioned his mother and sisters and never said anything about his father. What I hear is that the father is an engineer hailing from Rakai district. His parents, I later learned, separated when he was still very young, during an interview with the Daily Monitor in February 2018. Most of all, it has since emerged through credible sources that Radio's early life was shaped in modest surroundings and that it was at Mr. Nekinjit's residence in which Mwozey and 13 other boys lived. That very home was in 2017 turned into a nursery school. While it is widely believed that Radio's biological mother is a Musoga, no information is readily available about his true father. This story will only aim to bring you the facts from credible sources. This vacuum may give room to uncivilized characters to speak ill about Mwozey Radio. To get ahead of it, I respectfully urge that we do not, as a sign of honoring a fallen legend in Ugandan music, because think about it, such talk, at best, would be inconsequential. Mwozey Radio studied at St. Noah Mawagali Senior Secondary School, Biko, Holy Cross, Lakeview Secondary School, Wanyanj, Kiera College Butiki, and finally enrolled at Makerere University around 2004, graduating in 2008 with a bachelor's degree in community psychology. Regarding his primary education, sources indicate that he attended Kibai Primary School in Kampala, a universal primary education (UP) school under the Kampala Capital City Authority in Mekindai Division. When his parents separated, as narrated, Radio was looked after by his aunt, Sylvia Nekinjit, then at times spent time under the care of a Gingi-based Catholic missionary priest named Father Gerald Peter Pikivet. Father Pikivet was a philanthropist well known for helping the vulnerable. Unfortunately, he passed away due to cardiac complications about 2 years after Radio's death, in September 2020. He remains revered and adored for his work, especially in Busoga, to this day. Father Pikivet's life was one of service above self. Born in the Netherlands in 1938, he came to Uganda as a missionary in 1974. Until his death, he lived in Biola village, Budondo sub-county, Jinja district, making an impact on those who needed him or dreamt of a better life. Father Pikivet's wish was that his funeral be simple, with a wooden coffin without metal or designs. He requested that his grave not be tiled or covered with bricks and cement, preferring trees instead of flowers, as he loved nature. Young Mwozey Radio grew up moving between Bukaya and Jeru, walking dusty roads and attending local schools. Despite the early hardship, his mother, Jane Kasubo, remained a steady presence. She was the one who continued to feed hope into his gift even after his parents parted ways. It was through humble homes, amid market chatter and walks along dusty roads, that Moses first discovered his voice. From fresh food stalls to leading school choirs in Jinja and sitting examinations, he carried both humility and ambition. Although music made Mwozey Radio a star, at all his schools, Mwozey lived a secluded life and could only stop at revealing that he lived in Bukaya, a lakeside trading center in Jeru, municipality in Bikwi district. Was it a mark of intelligence, or the calm of a soul shaped by humility? Perhaps it was both. Mwozey Radio is described by Sylvia Nekinjit, his paternal aunt who raised him for close to a decade, as an intelligent and down-to-earth person, who would not attack anyone until he was attacked. First, this is contrary to sentiment and social media claims that Radio was antagonistic. Sylvia Nekinjit further added, he had a very good memory and would never forget someone he had met or had just been introduced to. I have only seen two people with such good memory, Moses and President Museveni. The Bible tells us in the book of Numbers 12:3 that Moses was a very humble man. He was more humble than any other man on earth. That is the word of God. And within it there seems to rest a quiet reflection of another Moses. Moses Nakented Sekibogo. Those closest to him describe him in the same breath. Gentle. Grounded. Humble. As if his name carried a prophecy. Radio, born Moses, walked in humility through life and through art. What part of his journey ever said otherwise? It is deeply heartbreaking to live with the fact that Radio is no longer here. It is deeply humbling beyond compare to picture that Moses Nakented Sekibogo, just like Moses in the Bible, led the Ugandan music industry with his angelic voice through such a pivotal time. But sadly, Mwozey, like the prophet, did not make it to the promised land. It is a very unique story, how Weasel, A.K. Douglas Mayanja, met Mwozey Radio. In a 2019 interview on TV, Weasel said, "One day I woke up and found my car washed spotless clean. This act had left Weasel astounded. I wanted to know who had done this. Previously, no one had ever done such a thing for him, or never mind that their home was always full of people. At the time, Weasel stayed with his brother Jose Chameleon. Upon asking, he was informed that it was the new guy who only showed up and left. The new guy had just been introduced to Chameleon by then Leon Island's Chaga. Chaga, himself a musician, had found this new guy at a barber shop in Entebbe, on the outskirts of Kampala. In Entebbe, the new guy went about cutting his client's hair as he serenaded Chaga and other clients who were in presence, with R&B songs that had dominated the 90s and the early 2000s. He sang with passion R. Kelly's songs as he did the Boys to Men's. Then, a happy client, Chaga, wondered whether this young man, the barber, wanted to explore the world of music beyond a cappella for his barbershop clientele. Chaga would offer to introduce this young man to the Leon Island boss, Jose Chameleon, who was and remains one of the biggest stars on the Ugandan music scene. Chameleon had around that time released the Mamma Mia music album, and the cover image was of him raising a rod donning a Masai sugar. The young man, eager to meet his Ugandan idol, showed up at the singer's home a few days later with a portrait of him. On receiving the portrait, Chameleon asked who drew this, as he walked out to see the artist. The artist's name was Moses Sekibogo. He would soon be known as Mwozey Radio, a moniker that would endear him to the rest of the world for a decade and more of music. This was in 2004. By 2004, Radio had joined Makerere University as a freshman. Around the same time, he moved in with his mother, Jane Kasubo, who was now living in Diba, a suburb on the outskirts of Kampala. To support himself, he took up part-time work at a barber shop run by his brother, Frank Sakandi. Radio skills as a barber would be honed here. While working in the shop, Radio often found time to express his two early passions, music and drawing. It was within those four walls, between clippers and quiet sketches, that a client named Jeffrey Kagambidwa, better known as Chaga, took notice of his talent. Chaga later introduced him to Jose Chameleon. According to an article by Leo Africa Review, Chameleon welcomed Radio into his artistic circle. But for Radio to join Leon Island officially, he had to prove himself. That chance came with his debut song, Jennifer. Radio embraced it with everything he had, and it earned him a place as Chameleon's backup singer and eventually as full member of the Leon Island Band. Among the bandmates at the time was Douglas Mayanja, widely known as Weasel, Chameleon's younger brother. As a newcomer in the band, Radio's role extended far beyond singing. He ran errands for Chameleon and bandmates, even washing cars, and act Weasel, who would soon become Radio's musical partner in the duo Radio and Amp, Weasel fondly recalls. Weasel later shared, "I was very impressed by his deed. He didn't have to do it, but he did it. From that day on, I asked him to always move with me. That's how we built a bond." The two were soon inseparable, even bending the rules together. A falling out with Chameleon and an eviction from his house led directly to the creation of the Good Life crew. At the time, in 2008, Radio had finished his BA degree at Makerere. Together with Weasel, they met Aziz Asian, who introduced them to Omulanja Rasuna, owner of a recording studio in their neighborhood of Nyanama, a Kampala suburb. There, then together with Omulanja Rasuna, they would record Nakudata, the song that turned their lives around, downside up. The intro of Nakudata set the tone, igniting a creative fire. "Well, it's a tough decision, Omulanja Rasuna. Kaboom kabam, show them randomly, musically, lyrically. One and only radio. Hey yeah, it's a tough combination, blazing fire." They quickly became the talk of the town. In that same year, they released hits like Nakutamani, Zwina, Nayambani, Namba Imu, and Lwaki Onumia. In that same year, some hits won PM awards in their categories. The crew also took home the award for Best Upcoming Artist in 2008. From that point on, they released hit after hit across Kampala's airwaves. Capital FM's Alex Ndolela dubbed them the dynamic duo. Their bond went beyond work, and the media sometimes called them twins. Weasel, on their closeness, said, "We did everything together. We stayed in the same house even after we could afford staying apart. When we went out to buy something, we bought it in pairs from cars to clothes. Whatever I owned, Radio too owned." Their closeness fueled their creativity. Without writing sessions, they'd enter the studio, and lyrics and melodies would flow effortlessly. Together they recorded at least 100 songs and filmed around 40 videos, not counting their collaborations with other artists. In fact, The Observer said that Radio had over 200 songs and dropped at least 25 songs per year in his illustrious musical decade. New Vision puts the number at 250. For a full decade, between 2008 to 2018, the Good Life crew dominated Uganda's airwaves. They were often in gossip columns over disputes with artists like BB Cool and Chameleon, yet tracks like Bread and Butter resonated deeply with urban audiences. Their music transformed everyday life into vivid imagery. It opened doors to global opportunities with brands such as Warner Brothers, Sony Music, and Coca-Cola. Offstage, Radio loved conversation and had a witty, sarcastic charm. As a child he was quiet and reserved, but where words were few, his songs spoke volumes. But 2018 started with tragedy. In the same month he was born, 3 days before his birthday, there were brewing reports that Radio had been involved in a bar brawl. On January 22, 2018, court documents indicate that Mwozey Radio was scheduled to be at the bar in Entebbe, and indeed, one Musumaya Pamela who was at the bar informed the bar owner that Radio would pass by. That evening, Radio entered the bar with friends, including producer and audio engineer Washington, Ibanjet David Otim, and Atajika Mohammed. They joined Pamela, her sister Ijesa George, Namagumia, Mwand Hossan, Nakonwagi Agnes, Ruka Razevia, Godfrey Wamala, A.K. Troy, and others. Court documents state that they gathered around a table and began to enjoy drinks. In typical Ugandan banter, Radio teased the bar owner, Ijesa George, calling him a poor man and offering to buy him a drink. He pulled out UGX 100,000 and ordered a bottle of whiskey, serving everyone present in their glasses. But something went wrong almost instantly. Surprisingly, Radio the Raptor splashed whiskey on the table and those around him, including Ijesa, Rakara and Pamela. This angered Ijesa, who asked Hossan Muanj to have Radio taken out of the bar. Pamela immediately intervened and asked Ijesa to take it calmly. She opted to take Radio out of the bar herself, and indeed she did. According to the court documents, that is how Godfrey Wamela aka Troy, known to Pamela by face and who had also been around in the bar, showed up and grabbed Radio, held him up horizontally and threw him down on the ground. There was a loud bang. Radio had suffered an injury on the head. His skull had cracked. He laid helpless and motionless on the ground. Immediately after the act, Troy ran away. Pamela and Atajika tried to grab him as he was running away, but they failed. On noticing that Radio's condition was getting worse, he was picked up and rushed to Emmanuel Medical Center at Abiyita Ababeri by Pamela, Washington, Atajika Mohammed and others. In the meantime, the bar owner Ijesa requested his friend Ruka Razevia to accompany him to Entebbe police station to report the incident, and when they reached there, they were detained. At Emmanuel Medical Center, Mwozey Radio was referred to Nsambia Hospital and later to Case Clinic, where he died on February 1, 2018. Before his death, Radio was examined at Case Hospital and the examination revealed serious brain injuries which were classified as grievous harm consistent with assault by gross manhandling. On February 1, 2018, at 9:21 a.m., the official X account at Radio and Weasel posted, "The king is gone." That was it. Uganda's pearl had fallen. The guy with the angelic voice which mesmerized all, cherished across the African continent and beyond, was no more. By the time Uganda officially heard the news, the king, Uganda's pearl, had already spent nearly 9 days in critical condition, first at Emmanuel Medical Center, then Nsambia Hospital, then finally Case Hospital, where he succumbed to severe injuries caused by blunt trauma. Producer Washington, who was with Mwozey Radio that evening, gave a detailed account of what happened. Speaking to at NBS TV. In 2018, not long after the tragedy, he said, "I found Radio at his home in Mekindai and he wanted to go to Entebbe because he was constructing a house there. He said I escort him. We got into the car at around 3 p.m. and we drove to Entebbe. We were 3 in the car. On the way, we were talking about life, love and collaborations. I was so shocked this coming from Radio. On this day, he was talking about the Bible and other things I didn't expect from him. On the site, he got a phone call from a lady called Pamela. Pamela told Mwozey to find her at the bar. We walked to the bar around 5 to 6 p.m. Pamela was at the bar with a group of her friends which I didn't know. They sat in a group on the side and I sat on the other side. We didn't want to mix with people who drink. I started getting a bad feeling about what was happening. I asked Radio that we go, but he insisted and we stayed. I walked out and then went to the car and rested for 10 minutes. When I met Pamela, I asked her to tell Mwozey that we should leave, and then she said Mwozey was about to get done. When Pamela came out, I asked her, "What are you doing?" because it was getting late. I insisted and went inside the bar. When I entered inside, they had shifted to the other side. The tone of their voices was on another level. They were over-laughing and Radio was not happy about that. I sat with him for about 5 minutes. They brought a bottle of whiskey and I saw him paying the money. He got the whiskey and started pouring in different glasses. He then got agitated and poured whiskey on the manager, the one who was talking ill about him. They didn't react because they continued laughing, but I noticed the manager wasn't happy. When I asked Radio what he had done, he said that they know what they were doing. In about 5 minutes, the manager got very angry and threw the table away. He, bar manager, then came for Radio and they were separated by this tall guy, Troy and Hossein Nwonj. I told Pamela to pick Radio out because they were together. The bar manager was taken properly into the bar. On the way out towards the door of the club, this tall guy, Troy, came shouting, "You have disrespected the owner of the bar." He lifted Radio up and threw him down, had him hit his head down. I heard his head crack. My instincts were to first pick up Mwozey. His eyes had shut down. We drove Mwozey to Emmanuel Hospital and there was a bit of delay. The doctors took ages to attend to him. They put him on drips instead, saying he had a lot of alcohol in his system. I was telling them I had his head crack and they should check his head. They said they could not handle the case and instead referred me to Nsambia Hospital. We then requested for an ambulance to Nsambia. From Nsambia Hospital, we were referred to Case Hospital because they told us that the ICU was full. Mwozey Radio didn't fight at all. This man, Troy, grabbed him and threw him down. The picture circulating is of the person who killed Radio. I can't forget the face of the man who killed my brother. I asked Pamela to get Mwozey out of the bar 4 times. She didn't do enough to protect Mwozey because she is the one who invited us. I attended Mwozey's burial, but it is unfortunate that some people think I wasn't there. I had a security team of about 15 people because I was told I was a key witness in this case. At this point, allow me to bring in the testimony of Boomlocks Miles HS1, formerly known as John Miles Coco Banton. I can confirm that I had the opportunity to speak with him. On the fateful day, he had been scheduled to meet Mwozey Radio at Freedom Beach in Entebbe, but upon receiving news of the incident, he too arrived at Emmanuel Medical Center later that evening.
Naye twali actually little bit far, twali nga kisubi. Tujja tutuuka. Nga alafu naffe tulinawo ko we tuli wano, twesange wali ku Freedom Beach. Ngamba okay, no problem. Ne bamugamba nti Moses has been beaten. Tumutwala ku Emmanuel. Ngamba Emmanuel from here to here to Italy. Distance short.
Immediately after the incident at the bar, as the bar owner and his friend were detained, Godfrey Wamela, also known as Troy, the main suspect, went into hiding and evaded arrest. In the eyes of the law, such conduct speaks volumes. Once Troy's identity was confirmed, police intensified efforts to track him using his phone records. His photographs were retrieved from social media to aid the search, and his close associates, Simaya Justine and Andrew Sonko, were arrested. On February 4, 2018, after learning that Radio had been buried and fearing mob justice from an enraged public, Troy surrendered through his sister, Keaga Jackie Mwanga. She contacted Kato Police Station, which later picked him up from the roadside in Kayenjara. He was first held at Kato Police Station and then transferred to Entebbe Police Station. In his charge and caution statement, Troy admitted having come into contact with Mwozey Radio and having witnessed the incident of assault that led to the eventual death of Radio and having disappeared from the time of the assault but denied participation in the offense.